And we are live. Welcome to the first episode of the Early Watch 2.0. Holy cow, it's been a long time since anyone's heard that name, Early Watch.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! Yeah, giving you back a early morning gun show. Man, how that has sorely been missed for a long, long time.
Yep.
Something, talking about guns in the morning, right?
Yep.
God, is that a thing, Daniel? You think an early morning gun show? Wasn't Early Watch? Didn't they have a pretty good following and viewers and back in the
Yeah.
day?
Yeah. They definitely, as I often say, and I often hear from quality instructors, is everything we learn, we come from those who came before, and hats off to the early watch, version one or whatever, they want to call it. But to Tony and God, I'm so terrible with names. What was the other guy's name? I'm losing track.
Jimmy, Tony, and
Yes,
Jimmy.
thank you, Tony and Jimmy. Yes, I'm having a senior moment here, and I'm not really awake because I only got 4 hours sleep. Uh, so yeah, thanks to them, they kind of established, kind of a concept, and I certainly liked it. Enjoyed it back when they were going strong.
And I've been sorely missing it ever since. I think early morning gun show, gunshot is something good for people to, on their getting ready for work or on their, commute, stuff like that. I think that's a good thing. So I sure have missed it, so I guess I have to be the one to do it now.
Yep, you stuck your big foot out there, so now you got to do something with it.
Yep, exactly. So I guess let's just jump into it with some gun news, right? So what gun news have you heard about? Anything pro 2A or, gut 2A industry or any kind of just gun news in general?
Well, one thing that I know that's actually live happening here in about 40 minutes, I think, believe is when it's slated to begin in Pennsylvania. I believe they're having a gun rights rally.
Yep, I think I heard Slim from Gun Channels was going to go to that today.
Right. In fact, I saw a message from him that he had some things come up, so he was not able to make it. But I know at least somebody posted up on gun channels that Midnight Range is either on his way there or there.
Oh, that's
Along with
cool. That's why he
possibly,
didn't have a show last night.
yes, at least I believe that's why. I don't know. I can't say I know that's why.
Oh, I'll just go out on a limb and say that's why. So.
But he's there, and I think he might be there with somebody else, possibly. I don't know if Black Cat is out in that area or not.
Yeah, and so this is just so is there something like anti-gun in Pennsylvania going on, like a bunch of anti-gun bills, and is that why we're rallying in Pennsylvania today?
I didn't see the details on it. I believe there is some things going on there, but I don't have a handle on that.
So I haven't really heard too much about Pennsylvania and any kind of firearm laws, at least not in the national news, like that I would hear about. Um, I have been hearing about this whole Cory Booker thing that I guess journalist guy or whatever, he's going around saying that he knows how to stop gun crime, and that's to give gun owners a national license. So national reciprocity, right? But along with that comes the whole, oh look, the federal kind of monopoly. You know, I don't know if that's a good idea or not.
Yeah, I have very mixed feelings on it myself. Because it's a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. And what I mean by that is, for some states that basically technically have carry, but in reality do not have concealed carry, that they would have that as an option. But for other states that have things like constitutional carry, where the bar is almost non-existent, suddenly there's a bar that has to be overcome. So you're existing a speed bump as a bare minimum on many states, and yet on the other hand, you're helping other states that have been caught in the quagmire of this anti-gun gun control fanaticism that seems to have gripped a part of our political control in this country.
Yeah, and what could possibly be wrong with a government, no matter whose government it is, obtaining a list that just so happens to contain all the gun owners' names on it, right? What could ever possibly be? How could that ever possibly be used, in the wrong way, right? Or malicious way? Like that's never going to happen, right?
I live in a state where we have a small version of that. We have a FOID card system in my state. That's a firearm owner's identification card. So we don't have gun registration. We have owner registration. So in order to purchase ammunition or a firearm, you must have a state-issued FOID card in the state of Illinois. So I imagine it would be something similar to that. But what are the requirements and how long, as an example, for many decades, it's been these FOID cards that we've had have lasted for 10 years between each renewal, and it was only $5. Well, now my broken down state is looking to say, well, 10 years is too long, even though they check our status almost daily to see if we're still eligible for the card, but they want to have the renewal every 5 years and then move the price from $5 up to $50. And as we all know, whether it's your local municipality, your county, your state, or national, there is no such thing as a temporary tax. They're all permanent, regardless of how they framework them to get them accepted.
And that reminds me of a meme I saw yesterday, and it had a picture of a motorcycle police officer giving a guy in a car a ticket for no seatbelt. And it said something along the lines, you'll realize it's not about safety when a police officer on a motorcycle gives you a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt, right? And
Right.
And when you think about that logically, then you kind of come to the conclusion, oh, you're right, it isn't about safety, right? And
Revenue generation.
exactly. And they're going to get that money where they see it. They see a little access of money or a little group, especially a group that they discriminate against. They will definitely squeeze it like a lemon, for everything it's worth.
Sudma, I just wanted to briefly, if we can take a half step backwards to Pennsylvania. Let me find my glasses here. I just want to read a little blurb out of article that I pulled up while we were chatting from mcall.com. Pennsylvania lawmakers showed courage last year. Now, we automatically know that there's a slant to this article. It took steps to reduce gun violence. They passed the first gun control bill in a decade and advanced other bills out of the committee with bipartisan support. While those other bills didn't become law, momentum has gained, and it's heartening to see that it is carried over into 2019. Only a few months ago into this year, roughly 40 bills have been introduced that would regulate firearms or address gun violence in other ways. And it says a lot of these bills have merit, but of course we know this website, MCall, is the morning call. A lot of these bills have merit, but lawmakers must be careful not to overregulate. Well, it's fine that they put that at the very end of the article, and it continues to go on. But that gives the gist of what's going on. As far as it's like an onslaught when you have 40 bills introduced, and I'm sure that they span the range from draconian to, well, it's just a minor little tweak. But death by 1,000 paper cuts is what I've been living my entire almost 58 years.
$40 bills, it sounds crazy to me. Like, that's a lot. I mean, that
Right.
really is. I mean, like, so they throw in 40 things in there. they only need to win 2 of those or something to make drastic change, right? I mean,
Right.
they,
So the rally today in Pennsylvania, I understand why it's warranted. I mean, just from the pure numerical onslaught of bills. And again, I don't have a handle on the specifics because there is so many. Actually,
I just can't even imagine. That sounds like more than a normal amount. 40 bills. That just like that's more than anything I've heard about like come through here, or even Cali. Really, like every time I hear about laws being pushed in Cali, it's always like 2 or 3 maybe at one time, but 40 more than anything I've heard about. Like that's just that's just too much. There should be some kind of reasonable limit. That I don't know. That seems like they're really going after. I mean, come on. What else do they like? What other subject or matter or topic or anything do they come out with 40 bills on at once? I can't think of a single thing like that where it's like 40 at once.
right. Excuse me, I was having some audio issues there. But yeah, it's just crazy. And I know in my state we now have the gun control trifecta. Is for a long time it's been similar to the federal level where the Democrats and the anti-gunners that lie within have not necessarily controlled all 3 branches of our legislative government. The governor's house, our state senate, and our state house of representatives. And that's what's kept a lot more draconian stuff from coming in my state. This year in January, that has suddenly changed. And now we have a governor who came in office who is asking for gun control bills to come to his desk to sign. We have an ongoing House of Representatives that is more than happy to accommodate the governor. And our Senate has flipped from Republican to Democrat, but Republican is no guarantee of somebody who's going to stand up for your rights, as we have seen time and time again. But your chances are incrementally better with one than they are the other. But trust neither and verify both.
Oh wow, we got a special host today, Tony. Thank you for joining us, my man.
How are you guys?
Morning, Tony.
I'll bet we've had 40 introduced.
Have you at one time?
God, I think every Democrat out there introduced one.
For me, that just strikes me. That's something I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about that or say something like that, oh my gosh, look at all these anti-gun bills coming through, 40 at once. That just seems like such a huge number compared to like any other number I've ever heard, right? I mean, really, I've heard of like 2 or 3 anti-gun bills coming through a certain place at one time, but not 40. Wow.
Most of that kind of stuff here gets shoved off into committee, and the stuff they don't think they can win on just dies.
Because doesn't 40 seem just a little bit malicious? Like oh, they're really going after this in a malicious way, not Because is there any other thing? Like, do they ever push 40, let's say, like tax bills through, or 40, traffic laws through at one time, like, or stuff like that? Is there any other thing like that they push 40 things through at once?
Well, I would say they're always pushing for what they want to make themselves look good to their constituents, i.e., the voters, as well as their co-workers. But they also believe in this special thing called timing, and there are times to push. And like I was mentioning, just Tony was kind of in transition as far as getting in here. The trifecta that we have in our state, where we have a governor who just says, "Bring them all in, and I'll sign them," and a House and a Senate that says that suddenly has turned into anti-gun. And so that's what's flipped in our state this year.
Well, Illinois has been anti-gun for, God, last 30 years anyway. I think that the whole sanctuary county thing made them rein in a little bit here.
I think we'll have a better handle on that as far as once something actually happens, because it's one thing for a county board to make that declaration. It's another thing to have the Fed saying, okay, we're now going to withhold, $8 million or whatever number it is of highway improvement funds in your county until you comply. That's when the rubber meets the road, and that's when we'll find out how dedicated these counties actually are, including my own, to actually staying the course.
Yeah, but the optics of it's not one county; it's like 63 so far.
Right, but I guess I've made the assumption in my analogy is that they would attack one county at a time, because you don't want to attack all of them at the same time. You want to pick them off one by one.
Start with the weakest one, right?
Yeah, financially the weakest, the most dependent on the federal system.
And isn't that how Democrats have pretty much ran their cities for the last 50, 60 years too? The exact same approach?
I know in my state, that's how they've manipulated our educational system, is by the threat to withhold federal highway funds if we don't comply, as well as withhold educational funds.
And see, that's why we laugh out here a lot. Like, it may sound weird to you guys back east, but like states like Utah, Idaho, Montana, like we laugh at the federal government. We're like, oh, like we want to do this, and you're saying like, oh, we're not going to give you road funding. Ha 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 ha, right? Like, because we're not one of these states that are like 20 billion negative at the end of every year, right? Like, we actually have a surplus at the end of some years. Like, we actually come out in the green, right? And so we don't necessarily need the federal government's money for road construction and stuff like that. So it's especially like Montana and stuff. So it's kind of nice for some of these states to be able to still say, hey, we don't need you, right? But back east, I don't know. I've never lived back east, but I just can't imagine it would be this, like, you can have the same power. I think you'd be so much more dependent because of the population density on the federal government, right?
Shit, we're probably about $10 short of bankruptcy as it is. And I'm sure they're going to fix that. Although I heard Pritzker's put out a bill to legalize recreational marijuana.
Oh, that'll fix it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I saw that, and they said it was going to be. They didn't use the word progressive; they used another word, equitable, and I don't know what that means. Equitable bill. What does that mean in regards to pot?
That it's going to make them money.
Well, yeah, we're going to, instead of doing a 40% sin tax on it, they're going to make it a 30% sin tax. Is that what it means? I don't know what it means.
They have to make it to where the dealers can't beat their prices, or it's not going to sell.
Well, that hasn't stopped in California, where illegal marijuana is still being sold, even though you can recreationally buy it.
Well, it's because they're undercutting them because of the taxes and stuff. People are, undercutting, going around the taxes, right? So that's why there's still a black market, is because they're selling it just a hair under the dispensaries. They're undercutting them, right?
Right.
I think they view it like cigarettes. People pay whatever taxes they are because they're addicted.
All right. So, like, not only morally, but in actual regards to the entire welfare of the state, the people, financially, what do you think would be better for a state to, let's say, legalize medical, or not medical, but legalize recreational marijuana, or legalize, let's say, gambling?
Gambling hasn't saved us, so let's try the weed.
Like, I've seen a lot of people make remarks about, like, oh yeah, it would bring us millions of income and taxes and be good for our schools and all this stuff. But they bring up all these negative points, but they're coming from a state that already has legalized gambling, and I'm like, man, what? Hasn't gambling done all that same stuff, but a lot worse? Like what? I mean,
I have a little
look at all the
history on
crime
that.
gambling and stuff brings, right? And just drugs and like just gambling in itself, gambling communities just turn into shitholes. They do. Like I watched it ruin Montana. I've watched it ruin other states, and it has a tendency to turn places into shitholes. It does.
I just want to use the example of Illinois because it's what I know best in regards to gambling on that specific topic. Is I remember back in the early night, and actually the 1970s, going back to we had a state lottery system in which how it was sold and billed to the Illinois residents is that all the additional monies made from that system would go directly into the educational department fund only, and it would not go into the general fund. And that was what we were told and what was in the bill, actually. Okay. But yet, what actually happened was something totally different. Over time, it transitioned from going in the educational bill to slowly becoming a 100% into the general fund, which is going into a black hole for all essential purposes. And that lottery system, which was then just our state, we didn't have the super lottery like we do today, is also exactly what happened with some of these. We had they used it under the guise of a historical sort of thing in regards to riverboats, and how back in the day when we had riverboats going on the Illinois River and on the Mississippi and on the Ohio, of which Illinois shares all three of those rivers. And there would be kind of a historical, quaint little thing. No, it had nothing to do with quaint nor historical. It was all about generating revenue, and it was all about, again, under the guise of going to the educational fund, which, of course, it never did in the end. It went to the general fund. And now we're going into the third phase, which is to say, we don't need these boats. They're kind of expensive. Let's go with these land-based casinos. Where we can just, take a strip mall, which is what they've done, and we now have one-armed bandits all over the state. With strip malls, with the little, in a little tiny strip mall with these places, where again, all that money is going to the general fund.
How have you seen it affect the actual people and the local populations, Dano?
Oh, it's had a negative effect because every time Tony and I are aware of this history because we've lived it, we've been here, we've seen the lies across the decades and how they propose it versus how it actually works out in reality. But when you start to take away hope because you have less, when you're young, you want people to be hopeful and that their government's not lying to them and that they're being told the truth and they can depend on what they're being told. And as you start to learn that, no, you can't trust them, and you have to, verify all sorts of facts, and that it's just a revenue Ponzi scheme. It damages our society in regards to trust. We don't trust our government, and that's the beginning of more bad things to come out, just generally speaking.
Well, hell, all you got to do is look at the history. Three of the last four governors went to freaking jail.
Yeah, corruption.
That's Illinois for you.
By the way, taking a half step backwards, I posted a link in the side chat. Did you guys have a chance to peek at it?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I'm looking at the five states least dependent on the federal government. And I'm really surprised that Illinois is in the top 5.
And
wow.
Yeah, Utah is right next to us.
Yeah, Kansas, Delaware, New Jersey, and Utah, Illinois, top 5 states for least dependent on the federal government. I would not have expected New Jersey and Illinois in there. Probably not Delaware either. I can see Utah and Kansas, but man. I guess
Well,
Delaware, because they're a small state. You never really hear about them from
it could be
anybody.
too that it could be that the government, the feds, ain't willing to risk their money getting pissed away too.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's not anything Stiller, Illinois has done.
And let's see, the 5 states that are most dependent on the federal government: number 1, New Mexico; 2, Mississippi; 3, Kentucky; 4, West Virginia; 5, Alabama; 6, Arizona. Wow.
You know, I'll bet that's largely due to welfare, especially like Arkansas, Kentucky,
I think
Alabama.
a lot of it's too roads, roads and road freeways and highway and road construction and stuff like that too on some of these bigger states. I don't think some of these bigger, smaller states might be able to afford just to upkeep all those thousands of miles of highway and freeway.
And then waterway maintenance, hydroelectric dams.
Oh, that makes sense why Arizona would be in there, just because of water, probably.
Think of all the unloading and unloading of cargo ships on our coastal states, and all the equipment that's required to maintain a harbor.
But you know, the interstates and the waterways would be under federal anyway.
Out in the chat, we have Vanessa Kitty saying now they want to put toll gangways every 6 miles on all state and interstate highways. Every 6 miles. Wow, that would be like Florida. That's what I experienced when I went through Florida. Is there was literally like a little toll booth like every 10 miles on that freeway, all the way from one side of Florida to the other. I had to do that, and yeah, that would really suck.
Yeah, it would. Better to add like 10 cents a gallon gas tax than that shit.
And Outlaw says it's no surprise West Virginia is on that list. The coal mines are all the people have there.
Yeah, and just for those wondering, this is from March 19th, 2019 from wallethub.com is where I'm got this link from.
I'll post that out there in the chat, Dan. Thank you. That's actually a good thing. That surprised me. That really shocked me. I would not have expected to see it like that. But like you said, when you think about it, like just Arizona, just from water, with that probably why they're in there, just from water, I bet.
I mean, think of the greater Phoenix area and the dependency in a non-water state. I mean, as far as natural water, and having to go deep underground to access aquifers. And when you're talking millions of people, you're talking a massive volume of water.
How much of Arizona is owned by the government? I mean, the real estate.
That's like BLM land and stuff? I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a significant amount.
Well, I'm sure, because there's just a huge amount that's literally is nothing but desert. That's nothing, right? It's just...
I'll do a little search and see what I can find.
All right, so this... Yeah, have you heard about any other gun news, Tony?
No.
What about this Cory Booker thing?
I haven't even heard that.
Oh, this guy Cory Booker is going around. He's some kind of journalist or something. I don't know how to describe him, but he's going around proposing a national license, right? Like and mandatory training for all gun owners. He's like, I know how to fix crime. We're going to make all gun owners get a national license and then mandatory training, right? And so that's what he's going around preaching. And I'm hearing some gun guys like, yeah, it's going to be national reciprocity, right? Like we're going to be able to carry it every state. And I'm looking at it like more on like the Schindler's List type way. Like this ain't a good idea.
That's gun owner registration, people, plain and simple.
Yes. I mean, like how many times has, governments in our history had a list of certain people they didn't like and then, didn't handle that information correctly. I mean,
I just pray that they find our FOID system to be unconstitutional. If they do that, then they'll have a mad scramble to do something else here.
Is that something that's going to go to like the Supreme Court to be heard?
I think it's going to the state Supreme Court.
The state Supreme Court?
I don't know. It seemed kind of thin to me, but they're saying that you can't be forced to pay for a right. But I haven't read up on it, so I may be off base on that.
See, I heard something. I'm trying to find it. I heard something about California mentioned something about that all those magazines that came in during Freedom Week.
Mm-hmm.
I've read something. I'm trying to find it, but one of the politicians from California wants to ban that now and wants like everyone who got the mags to. So they're proposing something where, they take that back somehow. Like that.
And you have to turn them in and get no money
Yeah.
returned for your property bullshit.
Yeah, the
sorry.
million mags that were bought. Yeah.
Stuff.
I can't believe that. That's just, that figures though. They're like, oh, we got our tax money off of this. let's make a million criminals overnight, and that's even more money.
And it always amazes me how much not how much they're willing to destroy the second, but they're also willing. Is it the fourth over private property?
Yep.
How much they're willing to stomp all over that, and yet where's the ACLU in regards to the fourth? I realize they, for some reason, which is beyond my comprehension, they don't seem to consider the second a civil right, which it is a civil right. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole at this particular time because that's a whole nother conversation. But how easily they're willing to tromp all over people's property rights in regards to, let's just look at the stock ban that Trump put in by presidential decree.
Yeah, I wonder how many millions of bump stocks were destroyed.
Oh, millions, or not millions, but I think 100,000 or something like that. I heard 150,000, but they're getting sued. So there's all bump stock makers have filed a lawsuit, and they're suing for that lost revenue, right? So that's going to end up coming out of the taxpayer's pocketbook. It's not like anyone in the government reaches into their pocket and is like, oh, here you go. I made this decision that affects you. Let me cover you. No, it comes out of the taxpayers.
Because there were far more than just those companies that got hurt by what happened. There's also all of their suppliers of which are owed money. Like they had to buy polymers in order to inject these molds with, to make these stocks. Well, those companies are now left holding the bag as far as they're owed money from these companies that made these stocks and were not paid because of what the federal government did.
Well, advertising, there's all sorts of laws, right? So
yeah. Employees that may not have gotten compensated completely. A contract, whether it be for materials or for personnel. Contract labor. I mean, there's all sorts of things.
Well, I hope that even though it ends up coming out of our pocket, I hope they win. I mean, I hope that they...
Well, it would be good to pay for something that we want.
Yeah. Well, and plus we still have the one gentleman. There's one guy right now who's still allowed to own a bump stock, right? There's like one guy in the country that's like still legal to own a bump stock, and he's fighting it. And if he wins, then that sets a precedent, right? And so, like, I think, I don't know, we might just all be waiting basically for his case to be seen through. At least there was one guy who fought this, right? So I haven't heard any news about that in a little while, but I'm looking forward to keeping up on that and seeing how that case turns out, because if he wins, that could be a precedent for us all.
traditionally, there's always been that one case that has made the pivotal difference, and it's unfortunate that the people with the money and control have to wait for that perfect case. And I understand why they have to wait for that perfect case to then pursue it in the courts to get real substantive change.
Well, it really needs to be something that's not super specific to the state that was brought up in. Like
Right.
McDonald or Heller, while they were brought by one state, the overreaching part of them is, nationally. What the hell's the word I'm looking for?
If other states are doing the exact same thing.
It encompasses the whole country nationwide.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
just wish that Scalia hadn't tacked the bullshit onto the opinion about some gun control is legal.
Right. Because without adding any specificity, that's a wide open, open-ended question. Well, what does that mean? Everything? Or just anything bigger than a 50 caliber? I mean, I don't know what he was referring to, but he never stated it, and that's the problem.
He'd have been better off to
not say anything.
Not written anything about it.
Right. What was the point earlier about or the question about BLM land? I put a link in the side. I wasn't sure.
Just curious how much of Arizona, the real estate in Arizona, is owned by the feds, because that's that much real estate tax that Arizona don't get. If they do real estate tax, hell, I don't even know that for sure, but I would imagine that they do.
I am looking for Arizona right now, and 72,700 total land acres. BLM acres is 12,200.
And they're number 7 out of 50.
That's not as much as I would have expected, I think.
Yeah, so that's about 1/5, like 1/5, 1/6 of the state.
Well, wait a minute. The third column over. The first column is total land acres.
And then the second one's the BLM acres.
I thought it was the third one. What's U.S.?
Yeah, the third one. The first one's Arizona 72,700 total acres, and then the BLM is 12,200
right.
of that, right? So
right.
about 1/6 of the state is BLM.
I know that from talking to people out there, Jimmy, for one, said pretty much anywhere you go out of town is BLM. But,
right.
Just chatting, so it could be off the cuff. And
what that chart may not take into account is Indian reservations, which in some states are huge.
And they won't pay taxes to anybody.
Well, right, they're a sovereign nation.
Right.
So although Arizona may have 72,700, I don't know, because it doesn't say if that includes the Indian reservations or not that are within the boundaries of Arizona.
Yeah, like out in the chat, they were mentioning too that it's not just a bump stock thing. It's that I think the way that law is written is it's devices that increase the rate of fire, isn't it? Isn't that
Yes.
Yeah, so that's just. That can go to a lot more than bump stocks. I mean, all that can lead to just a regular nice Geisley trigger, like not even a double tap trigger or something, just a decent trigger. So,
well, obviously New York City feels that way because it equips its officers with freaking 12, 14-pound trigger pulls on their guns. Wonders why they can't hit shit.
There is something to that. Like I saw a documentation that they had like one of the very worst rates out of every police force in the entire country. So it was something like 8%, like 8.3% or something when I read it. It was, so it was like 1 out of 10 shots were hitting.
Yeah, it was dismal.
But see, I don't know if it's just that, but see, I see a lot of police officers kind of getting trained nowadays to where it's not. They're trained just to dump their mag. I mean, they're trained like, oh, if you got to start shooting, you just shoot. And these guys, I mean, they don't stop until their gun goes click. It doesn't matter what the situation is. It doesn't matter what the guy was doing. If the guy was 20 feet away, just standing there with the knife, or whether he was charging, it's like, oh, it's just time to dump our gun. Like, let's just dump it all. Right? So I see that a lot more. Like, man, like, whatever happened to back in the day, like, oh, look, there's a crazy guy with a knife. Well, I'm going to shoot him in the leg. There he goes. Now let's take him to the hospital.
That when I went into the academy in '90, we were trained to shoot until the threat is stopped.
Exactly. I remember old Andy Griffith. He didn't even shoot back. He would just, go and like talk him into surrendering. See?
Yeah, well, East St. Louis wasn't like Mayberry.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you empty the magazine into the guy before he hits the ground stopped, you're justified in the training that I received. I wouldn't necessarily follow that route, but that's what they taught.
I think it's a shame. I think it should be more open to officers' discretion and officers' personal choices instead of just being told like, "Oh, you're just going to shoot." Like, nah, it should be more officers' discretion, and then they teach you specifically not to wound and stuff like that. I'm kind of against that. I think there's plenty of situations where it's reasonable to, try and wound somebody to prevent loss of life and stuff. So I think it's all situational. And I don't.
In today's world, we now have other tools to achieve that goal other than something that's made actually to be a fatal tool.
Right, yeah. The deal is that when you pulled that gun, it was a fatal he was responding to a event that entailed fatal resolution. You're pulling that gun to basically kill some bitch.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of this putting such strict regulations and codes and rules on law enforcement when they're out there and they're the ones risking their lives, right? They're the ones with their butt on the line, and not giving them their own discretion and a little bit more leniency. And I'm all for like pepper spray and mace or stun guns, stuff like that. But let's face it, like those have failed 1,001 times, right?
Okay.
We've all seen videos where those have failed. So I don't ever want to see a law like, oh, you have to use mace and then your stun gun and then you can go to your sidearm if those two fail, right? I don't want to see something like that. I want it to be left up to the officer's discretion, but I don't also want them to be told like, oh, you don't ever try and shoot a guy in the leg to wound. Like, you just shoot to kill him, right? Man, there's so many times where like you could shoot a guy in the leg and that would just be like, oh, it's done.
I agree and I disagree with what you're saying because, and I'm just going to throw out a generalism. If common sense were so common, everyone would have it. And I'm applying that to police and law enforcement. And that's why you have to have some constraints, general constraints in regards to the use of force continuum.
Here's the thing. 2 points here. One, the officer is the one with the gun in his hand, so he does have discretion. Irregardless of his training, if you got any freaking smarts whatsoever.
Well, don't go to common sense.
2, when I was working I carried the P-38 nightstick, like the one in the end of Lethal Weapon fight. They trained us that if you pull that nightstick out, you might as well pull that gun out because that nightstick is considered lethal. And I'm like,
So-
okay, that just did not make sense. But
See, I don't agree with that. Like they have discretion right now. I think it's based solely on where they're located at, what state, what city. Because like I was watching a thing with Australian police the other day where this guy has a knife. He walks up behind a police officer, stabs a police officer with this knife, right? And then like backs up and he starts this commotion, yelling, swinging this knife around. Has already stabbed a police officer, and like the police officer had a partner there, and they pull their guns and they're just holding this guy at gunpoint, and this guy's like charging them and looks like he's trying to do a suicide by cop thing, right? But he has already stabbed a police officer with a knife. They're still not shooting this guy. They still didn't shoot him, and I've been told that like they will get in some like serious trouble. It doesn't matter if the guy has a knife and is trying to stab them or not. If they shoot somebody in Australia, they get in trouble. So I don't know, like, and I see it happening here. The same thing happening here. So like I don't know.
Fortunately for us, we don't have that kind of a division, even for private citizens in most cases. If you're genuinely in fear for your life, and this goes for Illinois because I don't know any other state off the top of my head, you're justified in putting some bitch down. I've had to do that once when I was working in East St. Louis, and I hope to God nobody ever has to do it because it's not anything you'd want to live with. But I was approached by a guy with a knife, and he did what I had to do, and the court system exonerated me because I was an employee of the court. But that doesn't mean that it don't still weigh on me 25 years later. But at the time, it was, either do what you got to do or die. But, I didn't empty the gun on the guy either.
I'd like to get back to, if you're done, Tony. I don't know if you are or not.
Yeah, that's something I don't really care to talk about much.
Okay. The force continuum, because Dead Horse had mentioned depending on where you're at, and I think that's an important point, that an officer in Podunk, Idaho, versus an officer in New York City, versus somebody in St. Louis County, that the environment that you're in plays a role in not only the policies that your department is going to have regarding the force continuum, but also the tools allowed within that continuum. I mean, is it simply a stun gun? Not a stun gun. What do they call it today?
Taser?
Yeah, that, or a firearm. Is that your only continuum? Two things, or do you have three things? Because if you know the guy, oh yeah, that's the homeless guy that we see every other night down here, and this is his pattern because he actually just wants some food from the jail because he's hungry. That's what he actually wants. Well, if you're the regular beat officer and you know that, and you say, okay, in this case his name is Little Jimmy. All right, Little Jimmy, you want something to eat, right? Well, why don't you go ahead? Let me put these on you, and then we'll take you and to go get something to eat.
But you're not under threat.
Well, I'm saying, or you can have the situation escalate itself to where this guy actually has to do that, has to become a threat until he gets law enforcement's attention, and somebody that may not know him and may react quite differently and say, this guy's a threat. I'm pulling out either my stun gun or my gun. Local knowledge is critical.
We had a guy down in East St. Louis that would show up once a month or so at the courthouse and raise all kinds of hell. He was a mental patient or mental case, and you would have to physically put the man down and restrain him, but he was never really shit. It was a
Right.
threat because you could have got hurt, but he was not one that was intending to hurt somebody.
He was angry.
He was delusional.
Okay. But that's a perfect example of local knowledge makes a lot of difference.
And usually myself or whoever was on the post at the time and one of the court security guys would just grab the guy, put him on the ground, and cuff him. And then local East St. Louis police would come take him away. So
Yeah. And nobody had to die.
no, hell no. No, he wasn't technically a threat.
Right. And that's a kind of another example of what I meant.
Police officers don't get that particular familiarity with people.
It
They're
depends.
approaching most people cold.
It depends on where they're located.
Yeah, and they're beat, and they're like, yeah, I would say it totally depends.
The
I mean,
cops,
how
in
big
New
they're-
York City, I agree with you. In Chicago, I agree with you. And in St. Louis County, I agree with you. In Podunk, Idaho, I might disagree with you.
well, I would disagree with me here because I live in a town of 1,800 people, and the cop knows everybody. I mean,
Right.
He's been to my house. He's been to this house while I'm here doing an accident report. We know each other. But generally speaking, especially cities, or state police, every time they interact, they're interacting cold. They got no idea who they're walking up on. And
So are you making the argument, Tony, that police should have to police their own communities?
No, because that just doesn't work. You have to have them divided the way they are to a certain extent. But people need to understand the stress that these cops are under, and maybe they need to do a little bit more mental fitness testing for these large forces. Somebody who ain't going to freak out and empty a freaking magazine on a 17-year-old kid that's got a knife. But I don't know. I mean, cops are human. I am not in any way anti-police,
Oh no, I don't think any of us are.
except in my rearview mirror.
Hmm.
But shit, I haven't been stopped by a cop in Jesus Christ, 20 years.
So here's a little tip: if you just carry a Sarge C4 defense patch around with you, that's basically a get out of a ticket, right? It's like a get out of jail free card. So if you get pulled over for a speeding ticket, you just when he comes up to your window and asks for your license, you just hand him a Sarge C4 defense patch, and he just gives you the nod and walks away. That's it.
Plug for sponsorship.
Yep. No, I'm all for just giving police their own discretion, a little bit more leash, right? I really am, and that may sound like a bad thing, but I think in the end it's a good thing. I do. It's I don't like the idea of them being told that, like, oh, if you start shooting, you're gonna shoot to kill, or you're gonna shoot till the threat stops, like, basically dump your mag and
Well, the
and
threats
stuff like that into a 60-year-old grandma who can't even walk, right? Like, and stuff. And I've seen this so many bad cases of like bad shoots and stuff where, like, not just like, oh, they could have done this or that, but like, oh, there was a million things they could have done. Like, everything they did was wrong, right? And so I'm all for more training and all that, but I'm up for more discretion. I think there would be a lot less bad stuff, or a lot less people who are upset about things that might happen in that community and what goes on if they got a little bit more leash.
Well, like I said, at the end of the day, it's them out there with the gun.
Yeah, but I don't like the idea of them having quotas. I don't like the idea of them being a revenue generator. I want them policing the community. That means interacting with them, not just looking to write tickets.
Right.
That and I like the idea of them policing their own community because I think that's what keeps that's what helps keep the cops honest. And I think that prevents bad police officers and crooked police officers because when they're forced to police their own community, well, trust me, their community ain't gonna put up with it if he's a bad one. And so I'm for some things like that. I definitely am.
I would not ever support cops that are doing quota things, which we see here occasionally in Illinois, because it's a primary sense of income for some towns, or extra income. But as far as using the gun, if that gun comes out, it has to be in response to a lethal threat.
You know what I'm all for? I'm all for a police officer walking around a park all day, skateboarding, playing basketball with the kids. Just doing that all day, hanging around a park. Same thing
there
at the
used to
mall
be
or whatever.
a concept called officer friendly, where there was an officer out in the community doing that sort of thing. Now, whether that still exists or not, I don't know. I know in my little tiny town it doesn't, but I live in a little tiny town.
We still have a police bicycle, but I haven't seen a cop on it in 15 years or so.
And I'm all for that. Just
Yeah, I mean,
To me, that's
in big
policing.
cities, they used to walk a beat for that same reason. And they may not play basketball, but they would actually talk to the people sitting on the stoops or whatever. Or playing basketball, they talk to the people down there. Not harassing them, just talking to them.
I don't particularly care for the police being separate of the community. I think you're on.
I'll tell you what, I love hearing the stories when I read a story about like an officer saw some like homeless lady without shoes and he picks her up and takes her to go buy a new pair of shoes. Man, like that's what I like, dude. I'm like, ooh, like we need more of that guy, right? Like let's hire more of that guy. Like let's have more police departments like this police department that lets their officers do that kind of stuff. And not maybe so militaristic, right? And let's throw a little bit more Andy Griffith back in there. Maybe that's not such a bad thing to have.
I certainly would agree with that.
And you kind of touched on something that I think via what I refer to as the sand wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc., is there's a lot of equipment that has been given either mostly for free to state, county, local law enforcement that don't need them, but the federal government doesn't know what to do with them, so they just give them away for free. So at least they're off the asset sheet. Then the county sheriff picks it up and suddenly has an MRAP in a rural county, with no big cities at all, let alone a history of stuff that would require that sort of thing. And then next thing you know, you see, and this is a separate thing, but it's kind of related, is you see officers' uniforms changing to something that looks a lot more military-like than it does police-like. And that changes the mindset and the perception, both within the department and from outside to the department.
Well,
somebody who's dressed like a police officer and somebody who's dressed like a soldier.
We had a National Guard unit here in town, and they offered to give the city armored personnel carrier. So the city brings this up at the board meeting. Citizens are like, we don't even have freaking personnel. What the hell would you want a personnel carrier for?
Yeah.
And
and what about maintenance costs? They're not cheap.
They didn't take it, because the community was against it. Like, we got freaking 2 cops.
Yeah.
Well, and there actually might be some communities where that is needed. I've heard that there's like, was it Detroit or Chicago? But I heard that there's like certain neighborhoods like cops won't even go into, like literally, or they'll get shot at, just like their cars will get shot at, stuff like that.
And I can
And I've heard that
understand
there's like bad enough places like that that really exist.
in
So
places.
I could see that, but like, does a town of 50,000 people or 100,000 people need an MRAP? You know,
If they don't have a history of riots, the answer is no. If they have a historical history of riots like L.A., like Chicago, like Detroit, then you at least want to have not the daily presence, not the weekly presence, not the monthly presence, but the ability, if there is a riot, because if it's happened before, it can very much likely happen again, to respond appropriately to a future riot. And instead of putting a 50 cal up on top, you put a water cannon.
Oh, those water cannons will mess you up, boy. I've seen a lot of videos like that. It'll pick your feet right up off the ground.
Any tool has to be used appropriately or damage can ensue. I mean, that's just no different than a hammer.
I'm absolutely against the militarization of police force. I think it sets the wrong freaking precedent.
Okay. So Tony, you remember very clearly the 92 riots in LA?
Yeah.
Do you feel that water cannons would have been an inappropriate response?
I like the idea of Koreans on the rooftop with ARs better.
Okay. Well, yeah, but that's a last ditch. You know, do you ever want to let your point of defense be your front door? I mean, that's the last point you want to start defending. And they were, you know, ready to, but that's not where you want to begin. That's the last step.
I mean, that happens, what, every 30 years or so in California?
Yeah, it varies. I mean, there was the Watts riot in the 60s. But there, I mean, and there are other riots that, you know, not necessarily as big that pop up now and again. I mean, and then in the 80s in Detroit, you had the, around Halloween, I forget what they called it, but there was a specific name for it for the days before Halloween that they'd be going out doing arson all over the city.
Hell Night, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, where these same water cannons used for riots can also be used for helping subdue fires for when the firemen are overwhelmed.
But instead of a military vehicle, why not an extra fire truck?
Well, because one is free and one is not. And fire trucks are very expensive.
What's very expensive to the government?
Because it's our money. I know they don't view it that way, but I do.
I'm saying when they upgrade a fire truck, they could just keep the old one, outfit it with a couple of water cannons, and there you go.
I can see, like I said, in certain areas having something like that, but you know, I've seen videos here in America of Molotov cocktails, not like overseas, but in America, being thrown at like police vehicles. I've seen people jumping up and down on police vehicles, smashing the windows, right? Like just completely taking them over. And not even like a riot. We're talking like maybe a group of 20 people that take over a whole street. You know what I mean?
It could be
just 20 people. So, like, yeah.
The Bulls in Chicago win a championship, we get a riot.
So I can see like having like special equipment, special tools to do the job. They special, like, you know, the right tool for the job, right? So I can totally see in having that stuff. Not necessarily, you know, parading it around all the time or pulling it out for every little thing, but I can see an MRAP in certain cities like Detroit, Chicago, LA, some certain big cities. I can maybe see them having some MRAPs and stuff, but not like, you know, whatever town, Ohio with, you know, 50,000 people, you know. And a lot of those towns have those because, like you said, Dano, they were given to them for free. I know because, yeah, like one of our towns got one here, and I don't think it was free. I think they got it for like 10 grand or something, right?
Yeah.
And it was like super cheap. It was practically for free. And
Yeah.
and the only time they ever pull it out is for like the police safety thing every year, where they like, you know, where you bring your kids down to and they teach them about 911 and stuff like that. They'll pull it out, and it's mainly just like a showpiece, right? It doesn't do anything. Like they've never used it, so like,
But it still costs money, local money, to maintain, to fill up with gas. Those things, you know, don't get 30 miles to the gallon.
oh no, and it still has to be maintained, and I think they even
Insured.
paint it every couple of years. I think they've even been painting it every couple of years.
I mean,
You know,
in my county, and the largest city in my county is the town that I live in, which is 3,400 people. The largest town is 3,400 people. In my county, we have an MRAP.
yeah, and see, I don't
Zero
like.
history of riots,
Yeah.
but the largest city being 3,400 people.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think that's right for that. You know, I don't think that's needed right there. I think that's, you know.
And the sheriff, who happens to have it, you know, rolls it out every time we have our county fair. It's like, yeah, you know, that's exactly when I want to see it, when, you know, the 4-H is out there showing what they're doing, you know, things positive in the world. And now we have a weapon of war being shown here locally. Fantastic.
So you remember some of the gun shows that have been on TV, like Red Jacket or Gunsmoke, or, you know, some of those reality gun shows, right? So the one thing that I kind of like found interesting in those shows is when like a couple sheriffs would show up and they would want some special gun, right? And it wouldn't make sense to you. You'd be like, why the hell would they want that? That's like just more a toy, right? Like that's not even like, there's not even like a reason, a logical thing. That's like a toy they want, right? And I really got the feeling on some of those episodes that these certain sheriffs and stuff, like they it was like, oh, this is like, even though the city or county's paying for it, this is like a personal toy I get to play with, right?
Right.
I got to just give some bullshit excuse on why I might need it, you know. But now I get to play with this MRAP or this special you know, vehicle with, you know, just like all sorts of neat toys, guns, all sorts. Yeah. So I had a feeling that there might be some abuse going on there in some of these small towns. You know, like, oh, I need an M249 saw.
Oh God, can you imagine Barney Fife and an MRAM? Goodbye, Mayberry. But both of you just made the point I was making for me. Thank you. I mean, I really can't speak to cities.
You're welcome.
I don't live in one. And I haven't lived in one since I was a little kid. We lived in Detroit for a while. But small town America and that militarization of their police, I'm wholly against that.
The thing I'm biggest against about the militarization of the police isn't the fear of necessarily them hurting us or anything like that. It's not that. It's really that it gives the impression that they're there to protect you, that they're your line of defense, that the government is there to protect you, and that you don't need to protect yourself almost. And I think it kind of gives us a false sense of security, and it makes people drop their guards, and that like, oh, I don't need a gun, I got the police, I got 911, and it's just all part of that indoctrination of like, oh, the government, like, we're your mom and dad, we'll take care of you, you don't need like. And it's just a small part in all of that, I think, and I don't like that.
I had never considered that, but it's certainly something to think about. Guys, I'm going to step away and have some nicotine. I'll be right back.
All right. Yes, sir. All right. Let's see. Moving on in other news. Let's see here. We have Let's see, I had a link here from, I think, Liberty Headlines. Had some interesting news. Let me find that. Do you have any gun stuff coming up in Illinois, Dano?
I don't have a list of it.
Because there's always something going on there, right? Like just like Cali. Let's see here. I saw President Trump's approval rating was up to 58%, I think. At least that's, I don't know how truthful that is, but I saw a thing that was at least claiming that. And I think they said that was like the highest approval rating since like JFK or something. I was like, wow.
Well,
The
other than election time, does it make any difference?
No, but it is a sign, I think.
For the royal watchers, the princess is in labor, if she ain't had a kid already.
Who's in labor?
What the hell is the prince's wife over in England?
Oh, Prince Harry's?
Yeah,
The one that's got a little bit of brown in her?
Markle, that's her name.
I didn't know she was already pregnant.
That was the first page pop up on my freaking news feed this morning. She's in labor. I'm like, what the fuck do I care?
Yeah.
We stopped caring about the crown in 1776.
Oh, we stopped caring about the crown about 17.
Yeah, but women lose their mind over that stuff, including American women. Not all, but many.
Now, come on, you guys.
Well, I could see like Princess Diana, right? Because she was actually like cute, right? Like, so I can see like some of the cute princesses, sure. But you know, like I don't know why they're losing their mind over like Prince Harry or like any of those other princes or whatever. Have you seen those guys? Like, come on.
Prince Ginger?
Yeah, but they're route to becoming a princess.
Yeah, and in some ways it does exacerbate the whole concept. It's not about what the guy looks like. It's about the resources he has.
I mean, look at Diana and then look at Charles. Be like,
yeah. I mean, perfect example of that.
You're batting way above your average there, buddy.
And you got to say, well, why is that? Could it have anything to do with the size of his wallet or the resources he has available? Absolutely. And I think denying that is not being honest.
Well, she went from him to a billionaire, so
yeah,
kind of says all you need to know about her. Not that I'm besmirching the lady, just observation. Actually, way down the line, I'm related to her.
Okay, let's see here. I got some news here. So, in New Hampshire, a firearm seizure bill to be heard in committee is taking place. So, tomorrow, New Hampshire Senate Judiciary Committee will hold a public hearing at 9:45 a.m. on House Bill 696, which would take away constitutional rights. Listen to that. Take away constitutional rights of individuals without due process. Please contact committee members and urge them to oppose HB 696. I'll post a link to that out there out in the.
Well, now, I heard you ask Dano about that here, and the reason we ain't seeing big headlines here is because the red flag law and the bump stock ban shit and the how's the other? Oh, that onerous gun licensing for dealers. They were signed in by our freaking outgoing Republican governor. And then the one bill Pritzker signed like the day he walked in. So their big wish list of stuff is already freaking done.
Which is why we now have, like, one of the new proposals in this state is to take the FOID from 10 years down to 5 and significantly increase the fee.
Let's see. And let's see here.
Well, I'm hoping that this lawsuit goes through because that will end FOID program and the concealed carry because their premise is you can't be forced to pay for it right.
Yeah, but I mean, there's no telling the timetable of lawsuits, though, versus a law that can be passed and enforced. And we go from, what is it, $10, $15, whatever it is now, all of a sudden it's $100. Instead of every 10 years, it's not, it's every year. Because, the Illinois State Police rerun the list of names almost daily. So there's actually almost no need to have a renewal.
Oh, here's another good piece of good news. New program relieves people of unwanted firearms in Santa Clara County.
Well, yeah, we do that here. Any of you don't want your guns, just get a hold of me by email, man. I'll take them.
May 4th, 2019, the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office will launch a program led by County Supervisor Dave Cortez with aims to relieve residents of unwanted firearms. People will be allowed to deposit their firearms at the Sheriff's Office for no money in exchange, in contrast to a gun buyback, which pays people for their firearms. The office will not ask the givers about how they acquired the firearms. So basically, you can just turn them in with no questions asked. And the idea for the program first arose at the 2018 Community Summit on Firearm Safety, organized by Cortez's office. I wonder how come we never. I wonder if there's any pro-gun guys or 2A groups go to stuff like that. When some public officials like, oh, I'm going to have a 2018 Community Summit on Firearm Safety, right? The program aspires to reduce the number of people possessing illegal firearms, to recover weapons from felons and burglars, to prevent injury from accidental shootings, and to reduce in-home suicides.
Yeah, well, that won't work.
Yeah.
God, I hate these things. And I hate to see the number of people that succumb to the stupid shit.
I mean, if somebody wants to, they will find a way. It'll just be a different way.
Yeah, and if somebody is in that frame of mind, they're not going to give up an illegal gun that was left to them by somebody. It's like criminals. They're wanting to take guns from criminals, thinking they're going to turn them in. Huh.
Well, it's also, I remember the first time I ever heard about these sort of program, several decades ago, and I thought, well, what's to prevent, a criminal from literally getting rid of evidence and having someone else turn it in? And then now there's a gun with a body on it that's being melted down, destroyed, whatever.
Well, I don't think a criminal would go that route.
Well, I'm just saying it's a potential, and I don't think it may be rare, but I don't think it'd be that unrealistic to say, the only thing between me and that is this thing.
It's simpler to throw some bitch in the river somewhere.
Oh, wow. So, okay, so this is a little bit of a long one, so stay with me.
I'm here.
3 firearms, 1 illegally modified, found in vehicle search near Sonoma. So this is Washington, right? So a Sonoma man was arrested on firearms charges May 2nd after deputies found him bedded in the rear of an SUV with multiple loaded firearms hidden throughout the interior of the vehicle, according to the Sonoma Police Department. On Thursday evening, May 2nd, around 8 p.m., a sheriff deputy with the Sonoma Police Department was canvassing the area of Sonoma Marketplace Shopping Center looking for a suspect in a theft that had occurred late that afternoon at a business on West Napa Street. The deputy had a surveillance photo of the theft suspect and approached a parked SUV in the McCallew's parking lot where a man was lying on a mattress in the back of the vehicle. The deputy asked the man inside the vehicle if he had seen or knew the female suspect, showing him the picture. So at this point, this guy is like they know this is not the guy they're looking for. They're looking for a female. This is just some guy laying in the back of his vehicle, right? The man in the vehicle answered that he had not, but the deputy noticed a rifle case not far from where the man was resting. The deputy asked if he had any firearms in the vehicle, and the man answered that he had and listed 3: a rifle, a .38 handgun, and a Kel-Tec 9mm. Based on the fact that there were firearms within reach of the suspect, the deputy did not know the suspect's criminal record. He asked him to step out of the vehicle because automatically having a gun, well, like, we got to make sure you're not a criminal, right? Said Sergeant Jeffrey Toney of the Sonoma Police Department. The suspect complied. As he did so, the man said that the handgun was loaded, which, according to the description of the incident from the sheriff's office Facebook page, raised the seriousness of the situation. Because why would anyone want to carry around a loaded gun? After rapidly switching gears and now investigating a potential firearms case, the sheriff's Facebook summary read, the deputy located multiple loaded firearms hidden throughout the interior of the vehicle, easily accessible and within reach of where he was previously located upon initial contact. Because why would you ever want to keep your guns within reach of you, right? Like, just come on. A photograph accompanying the Facebook shows 3 weapons on the hood of the blue SUV, along with a small ammo can with a lock. The Kel-Tec appears to be a Kel-Tec Sub 2000 or similar, a firearm described by gunsandammo.com as a dependable carry-anywhere pistol caliber carbine for backpacking or the homestead. According to the press release from the Sonoma Police Department, the deputy located the .38 revolver within the vehicle, which was found loaded with 6 live cartridges. Additionally, the deputy located a bolt-action rifle, which was like a Mosin Nagant, loaded with 5 cartridges. All right, a loaded rifle, that's usually a no-go. And an illegally modified 9mm Kel-Tec assault rifle loaded with high-capacity magazines. So now this Kel-Tec assault rifle that's illegally modified, this is the Sub 2000 that folds in half. So they're trying to charge this guy for basically having like an SBR because the gun's shorter than 26 inches because the gun folds in half. So I'll just break down the rest of this for you. The gun's not illegally modified. From the factory, it legally folds in half, right? Like, so, man, that's just sad. I mean, this thing just sounds like this guy was such a criminal and a bad. They took such a bad guy off the street, a guy with a Mosin Nagant.
Well, I'll tell you, back to my going to the academy and training in Indiana, there was never one single word ever mentioned about the right of your average citizen to have a gun. Nothing.
So remember, so this guy's being investigated right now for having probably the loaded rifle, okay, which is probably illegal. He is probably guilty on that. I'm not sure if Sonoma's laws on like loaded handguns with or without a permit, so he could still totally be guilty on that. The Sub 2000 is not illegally modified though, so that they're in the wrong on that one. And if it was loaded though, he could still be in trouble for that because it doesn't mention if he has a permit, if he needs a permit for Sonoma. It fails to mention any of that stuff. But man, it really made this guy seem to be just some kind of hardcore criminal, and they took just like a hardcore criminal off the street, right? And this all started with them looking for someone else that wasn't like had nothing to do with this guy, and it's like, oh, how you doing? You know, is that a gun you got there?
Allow me to try these bracelets on.
That's all it took. So yeah, I mean,
Well, that's all part of the let's make having a gun too much trouble be worth it mentality.
And the article was clearly written only for local consumption and by those that don't know much about guns.
God,
I would
yes,
agree with that, Dano.
I was sitting here with God,
That was in the Sonoma Index Tribune, is where that came from. If anyone wants to find that article, May 2nd or
Because
May
who else
3rd,
would care except
Sonoma
for the
Index.
local people who think, oh, a bad guy's off the street. Great. Although, wait, what did he do exactly that was so heinous?
he owned a gun.
Clearly, he was, what I call mobile homeless, which is a real thing.
So let's see, I got some news coming out today. Gun rights backers scoff at proposed change to rules at heart of Supreme Court case. So let's see here. The Supreme Court had gun rights advocates cheering months ago when it decided to take up a case involving New York City's law prohibiting licensed handgun owners from transporting their firearms outside city limits. I remember hearing about that. But the city is now saying the case could be rendered moot. Efforts by the New York City Police Department and city officials to change to the restrictions at issue in the case have gun owners and gun rights advocates crying foul as they argue it's a transparent move by the city to preempt a ruling from the Supreme Court, which would be its first in a Second Amendment case in a decade. This was a blatant attempt to stop the court case, and the changes they proposed were minuscule. Tom King, executive director for the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, which is challenging the measure, said, "This is their last grasp measure to stop the case." The law at the center of the case bans New York City residents with so-called premises licenses from transporting handguns outside the city, which the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association and affiliate of the National Rifle Association and 3 handgun owners say violates the Second Amendment. Firearm owners are, however, allowed to take their handguns to and from the 7 small arms ranges or shooting clubs located in New York City. So what do you guys think about that?
I'm shocked that there's 7 ranges in New York City.
Right? New York City?
They do not want precedent set. Absolutely not. That's what I'm thinking. If state Supreme Court here rules that our FOID system is unconstitutional, I don't think they'll take it to the Supreme Court because the rest of the states in this that are pro gun control are not going to want to have that precedent set by the Supreme Court. They already got a pretty good bitch slap by Heller. That's why they didn't take the McDonald thing to the Supreme Court, because the outcome would have rendered what California and Hawaii and several other states do about the May issue bullshit.
Which is why I always kind of cringe every time I hear, it's usually a national organization, say, we have concealed carry in 50 states. No, we don't.
We don't. Any state that has May issue laws does not have constitutional concealed carry.
And there are some states with May issue where most people still get it.
Right, I get that, but the whole May issue thing is giving somebody a choice on a freaking whim to deny an honest, law-abiding citizen to get it.
I'm still of the mindset of what some of our founding fathers said, which was the moment you start to be taxed or pay for a right, it becomes a privilege. So, like, do we have rights or do we have privileges in this country? It seems like we have an awful lot of privileges that we're allowed to do a lot of stuff if we pay for it, but rights, by nature, by definition, can't be taxed or charged or paid for. Then it's not a right by definition.
Exact reason why there's a case here in Illinois going to the Supreme Court about our FOID system. That very reason. The rights shouldn't be taxed.
Let's see here, some more gun news. Okay, so scary. A Chattanooga firearms instructor is against a new online concealed carry gun permit bill. So why would a firearms instructor be against people getting their permit online? Because it's going to be bad for his business, obviously, I guess.
They don't have to pay him.
Yeah, so let's read what this is about. Let's see. So Chattanooga, Tennessee, a Chattanooga firearms instructor and retired officer is speaking out against a new bill that would lessen the requirements to get a concealed carry permit in Tennessee. It's dangerous to the public and it's dangerous to police officers, Mark Haskins said. It would be like showing up to get your driver's license and you've never driven a car before. The bill would give people the option to take a 90-minute online training class in order to get their concealed carry permit. Haskins spent nearly 30 years in law enforcement. He's been teaching firearm safety courses for more than 20 years and says these courses are important. Now we're going to let you carry a weapon, a very dangerous object, with no training. It's bizarre to me, Haskins said. We don't know if you can even operate the weapon, much less shoot it proficiently. And now we're going to give you a permit to carry it out and about? He says the new bill on the way to Governor Bill Lee's desk would potentially allow someone to get a concealed carry permit without any kind of proof they've had proper training or how to use a gun. Currently, to get a gun carry permit, you have to take an 8-hour in-person class. We want you to be safe. We don't want you to get this gun and hurt yourself or somebody else. You also have to pass a firearms qualification test, which requires you to shoot a gun in front of a licensed instructor. Mark's a gun advocate, but he says this latest bill doesn't make sense. I am not anti-gun. I'm very pro-Second Amendment, Haskins said. I'm a lifetime NRA member, but I do oppose this. It's a matter of public safety and a matter of my business making money, right? And so
has to give themselves the credentials by prefacing or ending their comment with, I'm a lifetime NRA member, equals I'm a FUD. You know everything about them.
So, I doubt this guy will ever hear it, but, in many states like Utah and stuff, like you really don't need like any training. Like, there's many states where like, even like we do go to a class here, our class here is like 30 minutes. And it's basically just to get like fingerprints and your picture taken, and there's very little instruction, and you don't shoot a gun or qualify with a gun. That's up to the actual individual instructor if they want you to do that for their course, right? That's not a requirement, because then it's not a right. And where it really starts at, what's this guy's name? Mark Haskins, where it really starts at is at home with the parents teaching their kids how to use guns and proper firearm safety, and that's where it should start at, right?
Yeah.
It should start there, but we can't count on that.
Keep and bear arms is a right. Period. Nothing about training for any fucking rights you get. This is why I oppose the whole idea of mandatory training for any of that shit.
So uneducated, so imagine this, okay, guys, let's role play a little bit. So imagine you have an IQ of a tomato, okay, roughly about 85.
You're probably
you're a lifelong politician, okay, and you don't know anything about anything really, right? And because like your schooling was bought and paid for by daddy, and and just you've never had to do anything your whole life, right? Never had to work a hard day, nothing. You don't know anything. You don't know the real world. You're not in touch with real people, you know. And but now you're some mayor or city council member or something, and then this guy comes along who is a professional, 30-year law enforcement, 20-year firearms trainer, da da da, and he's telling you, oh no, this is guns are bad. We can't have people on the street without training, right? Like who are you gonna believe? Like I can't blame these dumb politicians for necessarily taking people's advice, especially when they're like, listen, I'm pro gun, I love guns, you know. So when you got two sides of the arguments, when you got like anti-gunners saying, oh yeah, this is bad, you got pro gun guys saying, oh yeah, this is bad. Come on, like who are the politicians going to listen to?
I'm surprised he didn't resort to the if you pass this bill, it's going to be like the Wild West and blood will run in the streets.
Streets.
Yeah, let's not point out any facts. Let's just try to play on people's emotions. Yeah, let's not point to states that have similar laws as to what's being proposed and what happened immediately after, or maybe what didn't happen immediately after. Those would be called facts.
They seem to forget the whole fact that for the first 150, 175 years of this country's existence, there wasn't this plethora of firearms training.
Yeah, and listen, there's so many different reasons and ways and whys and hows for a person to own a gun that I don't think it's reasonable to be like, oh yeah, you have to have this training and da da da, because there's people who just want a gun to stick, literally just to stick in a drawer for a little sense of security, and they don't want to train. They don't even want to shoot it. They just want to know it's there. Right? Like there's so many different reasons and whys and hows. I don't like that. I don't like, oh, you have to take an 8-hour class or you have to do that. I want them to have the option. So there should be some, just like here, there should be some places you go to. They're like, oh yeah, we make you shoot, we da da da. None of it's an actual requirement of the state, but that's our requirement at our class, right? And then there's other classes that are like, oh, like you've been around gun 20 years, like you don't need any of this shit. Just come in here, fill out your paper, you're out of here in 5 minutes. So
I don't care if people want to train. Train all you want. That's fine. But inalienable rights are just that. You have that right without no cost or requirement, class-wise or anything like that. It's just there. And I can't see anybody who's truly pro-gun taking that freaking stance.
Generally speaking, by the time somebody is, I'm going to say 21, because ages are changing and so forth, but let's just say 21. The majority of people with severe mental issues have already been plucked from society and identified. And some of them need more or less directional support than others. Okay. So we've identified those people. Those are the people we do not want to have firearms because they don't have their full mental faculties to be able to make good decisions. Those are the only people that should not have firearms. Otherwise, everyone should be able to have a firearm if they want. And if you want to know more so that in case you do have an incident, your odds are better in your favor, that's optional.
Now look, I don't want to see mentally impaired people having guns, whatnot. But do I have the moral or ethical ground to say that you are mentally not fit to have this right?
Yes. Legally, we do. Through the court system.
Legally, I'm talking morals and ethics.
Yeah. I mean, morally, aren't we obligated to protect those that are not able to protect themselves from themselves?
That's assuming that every one of them will instantly kill themselves if they get a gun or somebody.
No, I'm not talking about instantly kill them. I'm just saying they're more likely to kill them. Kill another,
But
not necessarily kill themselves.
if you take that tack, people who are carrying a gun are more likely to kill somebody with a gun than somebody who ain't.
Okay. I can tell you from my own experience many decades ago when I worked with the school systems and the mentally ill, they don't necessarily understand things called repercussions of actions, and they don't really understand what death really means, depending on the level of retardation. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole necessarily. I'm just saying that we need to protect those that can't protect themselves even more so, even if that means protecting them from outside threats and protecting them from inside threats.
I suppose, and I don't want to say this because it's going to stir up a bunch of shit, but and on one hand, I don't want to see people who are mentally impaired having guns. I really don't want to see it. However, I think that being mentally impaired does not prohibit your rights. Shouldn't, as much as like being a convicted felon. And even in that, when a convicted felon serves their sentence, they should be allowed to have their damn rights back.
I think the only way to truly do on that, which is a shame to say because it's like infringing on their rights just to say it, but it has to be taken on a case-by-case basis when it comes to something like that. Because I think there are some people with some mental disabilities that are perfectly capable of owning firearms and just as much as any other person in the world. And but then there's some people with mental disabilities that we all know that none of us would want to have a firearm, right?
Right.
So,
I'll give you a perfect example. The baby blues, as an example, is a transitory mental thing versus actual mental retardation, which is permanent. That's not going away. It ain't getting better. That you have to have, hopefully the person can stay with their parents, but when their parents die at some points, and now that child is now 35, 45 years old, maybe, or maybe older, what are you going to do with that child? How are you going to, because
assisted living, yeah.
It's still a child, even though the person's 45 years old.
Yep, they all end up in assisted living with
Right.
3 or 4 other guys that are just like them.
And the reason I say protect themselves because they're mentally and emotionally still 8 years old, even though they're 45 years old. That's why it's up to us to protect them both from outside threats and internal threats.
And it's important to remember that not all people are born like this. It can happen from just a head injury.
Yes.
And stuff. So someone can be 40 years old and have had a normal life, and then a motorcycle accident or something, and now they're like this. So
Yeah.
and then then what do you do at that point if he's already a gun owner, right? And is it infringing upon their rights to take those guns away? And so it has to be taken by a case-by-case basis by your peers, I think. I mean,
the point of the courts is to have a third party, hopefully objective individual or group of individuals make that decision rather than necessarily who's not objective, which might be the family, could be friends, could be the occupational health person that's been involved for years. They may have the greatest of intentions, but they're not objective.
I still think the choice should be made by family or friends, and then if they're not available, right, then it would go to the court. I still think their mom and dad, wife, whatever, should have this the say.
And I understand we disagree on that, but that's okay.
Who would be more likely to be honest about their child's capability to safely have firearms than the parents?
I would disagree. They are more likely to be subjective than objective. Somebody who doesn't have a dog in the fight is more likely to be honest about what's the capabilities of that individual.
I think for some things you're right, Dano, but I think when it comes to like something safety and it comes to something like a firearm, right? I think that's when a parent is really going to be like, instead of like, oh, my kid's the best at this and, da da da, or my kid's, my kid's like the best dancer in the world, right? He's going to be a star. Like, no, they're going to come down to earth and be like, no, like, I don't think my kid's capable of, safely doing this or whatever. At least I would like to think that,
You
right? That,
you might
And
get some extremely pro-zealot gun advocate that would not see their kids' lack of capabilities, but by and large, most parents would, say, "Hey, this is not a good idea."
I'm not saying just for clarity, I'm not saying that parents should not have input on what ends up happening. No, I believe they should absolutely be involved in the process. That they are the main witnesses or the main contributors to the facts at hand.
I have a bias on that thought because I think there's too many outside people in charge of our children these days than far too many.
so I'm going to change the subject here. I got a little bit of good news here in the firearms world. At least I think it's good news for at least some gun owners. At least 14 of them today. So Greensburg police allege woman bilked 14 customers in firearm sales scheme. So Greensburg police accused an Allegheny County woman this week of bilking $15,235 from 14 customers in an online firearms sales scheme. Jennifer Bittner, 24, of Monroeville, was charged by city police with 14 counts each of theft by deception, and receiving stolen property before District Judge Chris Flanagan. Detective Sergeant Charles Irving alleges that Bittner placed multiple advertisements on a website called armslist.com in 2018, selling various firearms between April and October, and had some of the customers reply by sending money orders to an address of a friend who resides in Greensburg. Irvin wrote in court documents that the amounts ranged between $1,850 and $300. In each of these cases, payment was made for a firearm advertised on armslist.com. In each of these cases, no firearm was delivered to any victim, Irving wrote in the complaint. After speaking with Bittner, who said a friend was a partner in the sales, Irvin said that he obtained records from Bittner's bank accounts. Irvin said the records indicated that all of the checks were written and endorsed by Bittner and deposited into her bank account. Bittner cannot be reached for comment. Preliminary hearing has not been scheduled. But anyway, they caught her, and 14 guys are going to get some justice back. But never, ever, ever send money for a gun
Hell no.
online. Only to an FFL.
Now I'm curious.
So, yeah, like
They said there was 18,000 yet the guns ranged from 1,000 to 350, and 14 potential victims. Something ain't adding up here.
let's see, yeah, 14 potential victims and 15,000 in dollars. 14 victims, and in the prices ranged between $1,800 and $300 between the victims.
Okay, I misheard that part then.
And then and I see these, right? Like I see them on my local buy sell gun websites. I'll see this ad and it'll always be like SIG P229 $350. I'm like, dude, click on it, right? Then it's an out of state phone number, right? and like the wording on the city isn't quite right, like, or like, you know, the spacing or the, you know, something like something will be off with the ad, right? And like, you know, but then you call the number and the guy's like, yeah, I'm out of town right now, but like, yeah, if you want the gun, just Western Union me some money, and you know, I'll send it straight to your house. And I'm like, not today, ATF, right? But sometimes it's not the ATF, sometimes it's people trying to scam you out of money. So either way, it just goes to show you, you just say not today.
I really don't buy guns from people that I do not know, that I have some sort of relationship with, like local gun shop, family member, like gun range, which is also a gun shop. I did buy guns from them. Uh, I would not buy like Arms List or something like that.
I will buy a brand new gun and have it sent to my FFL from a reputable business, right? From an actual business, from another FFL. I will never buy from a private party, like on Gunbroker or something like that, without seeing the gun physically, right? I just won't. Like, it doesn't even matter if I'm worried about it being a scam or not. I'm never going to buy a gun, a used gun, that I can't see first, that I can't hold, that I can't physically look at. So I never have to worry about being scammed because I'll never do that. And
One gun that I haven't held, and that's that 1895 Marlin. And I only did that because it's so hard to get one of them at the time. I said I'd take it before I even seen it. Well, I guess
and let's say, like, for some reason I found some unicorn I super wanted and it was a private sell, I would be calling that guy's FFL, verifying it, double checking that phone number in Google goes to an FFL gun business, and I'd be calling that FFL, you know, and I'd be having my FFL call them and transferring their numbers, and I would be like doing it. I'd be pretty much letting my FFL be like take care of that, right? Like, I'd be like, okay, this is what I want, you know, get it to me, and that's what they're there for. That's why you pay them money. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but my FFL, like, if I want a gun, I can literally call my FFL and say, hey, I want a SIG P229 right now. You know, do you got one? No, get me one. And he will like look around and find me the cheapest price, new or used, you know, depending on what I tell him. And he'll, you know, be like, hey, I can get you one right now for whatever price. Do you want it?
Mine, the Pekin Sporting Goods, is the one I use most of the time, or for most of the amount of guns that I've bought. All I got to do is call them, and if they got the gun in stock, I just got to say I want it, and they'll mark it sold without me coming in putting down a penny. But they know that I'm fairly reliable if I say I want one. How long you aiming to run this, Dead Horse?
He might have stepped away for a moment. But yeah, going on the Gunbroker thing until he gets back. I bought off a Gunbroker, you know, what's called NIB or New in Box, maybe twice. Was either once or twice, I can't remember. And I had it shipped to my FFL, you know, via their FFL, and unless they were one. And didn't have any issues. I would be hesitant to purchase a used gun off of there without being able to see it, because what they may consider to be fair condition and being, you know, safe to fire may be different than what I consider to be fair condition and safe to fire. And yet, you know, the price should reflect, is it really fair by the customer standards, me? And that's where, you know, don't be afraid to ask for additional photos and close-ups.
I have two rules to buying from a private party. Is number one is never tell the guy you're going to buy the gun for sure until you see it. And number two, never go to buy the gun at night.
No shit.
Now, I've never, again, I've always gone through the FFL route, but so other than not going at night, what are locations that you would say Dead Horse are no-go locations even during the day versus generally what are some good areas, generically speaking?
No go
Make a
is
transaction.
no go is any parking lot of a gun business or FFL because it's illegal to do a gun transfer on FFL property without being an FFL, right? So if you're out in the parking lot, if you're like, oh, meet me at the gun store and let's go do this gun trade or sell right out in the gun store's parking lot without going through the FFL, right? Without going in the store, that's illegal. So don't stay away from gun store property, right? An FFL property. So don't do it on any FFL property. That's a bad place to do. Never out in the middle of nowhere, like, oh, at this rest stop or off the, like, even if it is convenient or halfway, never just where there's not going to be people around, like isolated places and stuff. My favorite places are literally like 7-Elevens, Walmarts, Arby's, McDonald's, any busy place like that. I don't give a shit if people like, oh, because in my state, I can open carry. We pull guns out in parking lots. Like guys walk around in Walmarts with ARs. It's not a thing here. So
you might want to think about the Walmart thing because they are a FFL. Even if you're
but usually out in like that far back parking lot, and they'll be like, I don't know about your guys' Walmart, but there'll always be like an oil lube place out there too and stuff like that, and they kind of share that. So I don't know. I think that would probably be safer, like something like that. But any real busy place in daylight, good daylight, where you can really look at the gun and take a flashlight so you can look down the barrel, and but never buy one at night. And not on like FFL property. But I think a Walmart, like if you're like out in that far back parking lot, because it's usually like common use, I think, because they usually share it with like so many other businesses. At least mine do. Like all my Walmarts have like 20 other stores all around them. They all use the same parking lot. So I don't know.
I don't know. I have never bought a gun that way, so I'm not.
And I don't like them coming to your house, right? Because you don't know who's coming, and then you're like, oh, well, you're basically telling someone, oh, here's some of the guns I have, and here's my address, and come on down, right? And then, so I don't necessarily like them coming to my house. I don't have to. I'll go to their house if they're cool with that. I've had plenty of people that are like, "Oh, come over," because I know I'm not. I know I'm not a bad guy. I'm not going to go back and break into it, right? So I'm cool with going to their house.
I'd be a little concerned about going up to their house because I don't know what I'm rolling into. Is it just the one guy coming out, or are there 4 other guys coming out the back door that I don't know about?
Well, if you can usually know by the address though with your area, right? So like if they give me an address, like I'll know like, oh, that might not be. You can just know from the address, like, oh, that's a little too far away. How about we meet at this, gas station or something, this restaurant.
Yeah.
Because come on, you guys all know the bad addresses, right? For your cities and towns and stuff. Like you all know the bad streets or the bad areas where they're like, oh, it's over on this west or this south, and you're like, oh, that's on the south side. Nope. Like, yeah. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, small town here, I don't have any bad areas, but the bigger towns around, I have no idea. I mean, I know the south side of Peoria is tough, but to be specific about it, I really don't know.
And I would say if you can, take somebody with you, too.
I most likely will never buy a gun that way anyway, so it's not something I really ever thought of.
Yep. Take someone with you and take a bill of sale. You can, like, if it's legal, and this is if, granted, private firearm sales are legal in your state. Take a bill of sale, and then always make sure, just real quick, oh, hey, can I see your license? Right? And because they usually they got to be a resident of your state, right? And so, yeah.
Here you're supposed to call the state police with their FOID card and make sure it's valid, because if we have a gun, we're required to have a FOID card. And I don't know, there's just, like I said, I don't buy guns that way, so I'm not super familiar with all the shit that goes with it.
And then you want to keep that piece of paper. You want to keep that bill of sale for real. Like, even if you're selling to a friend, you want to keep that bill of sale, especially if you haven't had that gun for very long. You know, like if you've only had that gun for a couple months or something, you know, even to a family member or a friend, get that bill of sale. You never know who's going to knock on your door one day and be like, "Oh, we want to see this serial number. We want to see this." It'd be handy to have it.
That's okay. I want $1 million.
I have.
You gonna give me that?
I have every sales receipt of every gun I bought.
Yep.
New, used. I bought them all from FFL dealers, except for the Ruger I got from my daughter.
I know I have bought a lot of private gun sales just because deals. I mean, let's face it, though. Sometimes private gun sales, I mean, man, I've gotten some really good deals on guns. You know, $800-900 guns for $400 or $500. You know, like this. You know, great deals, because sometimes people are like, "Hey, you know, I made a mistake. I overspent whatever. I got to pay rent right now. I need, you know, I need $500, you know." So that happens. So, and I've ran into that and like, bam. And, you know, and I don't look at it like as ripping them off, because it's not like I approach them. I mean, I look at it as helping them out. You know, they're like, oh, they're the ones wanting to sell it, right? So
I've been in that needing rent money department a couple of times, but fortunately these days it's not an issue anymore.
I did it after my divorce. I was there. I sold guns. I had I know, man. I was hurting for rent and like all sorts of stuff. Oh, more mortgage, you know, to make my mortgage.
Yeah, when I had my first heart attack, I was out of work for about 8 months because of just weird ass circumstances surrounding it, and I sold all my freaking rifles, and I just figured that when I got back into getting guns, I was gonna be sure that I never had to sell them again.
Yep. I said the same thing. I was like, no, I'm going to take steps so I never got it. Nope.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but the pitfall of that is like, well, how much insurance is enough? Well, it depends on what befalls you in life and how deep of a black hole financially that's going to drag you. I mean, there's no way of predicting that.
But that's a good thing about firearms, though, compared to a lot of other things that could be collectible. Like, let's take Coca-Cola memorabilia for an example, right? Because that's a popular thing for people to collect. That if you're a collector of that stuff and all of a sudden you fall on bad times or whatever and you need money, selling your Coca-Cola collection could be really time consuming, and you're probably not going to get anywhere near out of it than what you're probably into it. Whereas guns, on the other hand, a lot of them increase in value even with use, as long as they're taken care of. And they sell fast. I don't know, like, I think guns can be like a real good investment, and kind of like almost like how some people are like, oh, I'm going to buy gold and buy silver because the price is going to go up, I think, in the next 10 years, or, you know, then I'll cash it in, and it can be an investment just like that.
I agree with you as far as being quick money back. As far as the maintaining your money or getting more, that very much depends on what you buy, i.e. all out there that are High Point owners.
Okay, here's the thing though. But High Points really go down in value. I mean, like, I think a High Point new here is like $139, and I actually see them sell a lot, like used for like $150, $200. You know, because they'll have an extra mag or a holster with them or something. But they seem to hold their value. They do.
Well, if you're adding something to it, you're also adding costs that you had to do to get that magazine, to get that holster, that sort of a thing. You're never in that entry level, or inexpensive, that sub $300 level are going to break even. It's going to be, if you're fortunate, 2/3 typically of what you got it. If you're going to a gun store to actually sell it. If you're going on Gun Broker, then that can vary things. Or if you're going private sale, that can vary things. But that's also going to mean it's going to take longer, and you're not going to get money today or this week.
My biggest advice for guns that are going to be worth money, like down the road, steal guns. Steal. Steal.
I think that every gun I have here, except for the 4 cheap ones, has went up fairly significantly since I bought it.
Right, and that's a good example of it depends on what you're buying to start off with, as far as any possibility of just maintaining, let alone growing. I mean, my Glocks are not going to be worth more, let alone the same, if I were to sell them today or sell them 5 years from now, barring some unforeseen event.
I don't think that the Ruger stuff or the Uberti stuff is going to go way up, but they are worth more than they were when I bought them.
Mm-hmm.
Especially those 1875 Outlaws, because they've taken a bit of a jump. And I don't know. I haven't priced a Super Blackhawk lately.
All right, so I got another story here. Former security guard pleads guilty to firearms ammo theft from ATF. A former federal contractor pleaded guilty on Wednesday to stealing firearms, ammunition, and firearm parts from the ATF facility where he was a security guard. Christopher Lee Yates, 52, of Martinsburg, told U.S. Magistrate Judge Robert Trumbull that he took the items that still appeared to be intact from recycling bins at the ATF's National Firearms and Ammunition Destruction Branch, NAFD, facility near Martinsburg, then sold them. The ATF facility is now at 244 Needy Road, but was at 5550 Winchester Avenue, south of Martinsburg. Yates faces a maximum of 10 years in prison, $250,000 fine for each offense. The government's investigation found that Yates stole from the ATF facility and trafficked firearms, firearm parts, and ammunition from 2016 to 2019. According to a plea agreement filed Wednesday, Yates worked for approximately 16 years as a contract security guard. He had access to virtually the entire facility, including areas where firearms were stored and destroyed, according to court records. According to the government, Yates admitted to stealing at least 3,000 Glock slides by entering the facility before other employees arrived. 3,000 Glock slides?
Yeah. What's he doing with all these slides?
Whoa! Yates sold the Glock slides for $30 each. They were then resold for $100 each, record said. Whoa! Wow, 3,000 at $30 each. What is that, Dano? How good's your math?
Off the top of my head, not that good, but
that's $90,000.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. The federal investigation began in February after the Philadelphia Police Department recovered a firearm described as a ghost gun during a traffic stop. According to testimony by ATF Special Agent Seth Cox on Wednesday and court records, the type of gun is also known as a polymer 80% receiver, according to court records. The slide of the firearm was from a Glock 40 handgun. The slide was traced by serial number back to the ATF facility as having been destroyed. According to Cox and court records, altogether, Cox testified on Wednesday the government recovered more than 4,000 items as part of the ongoing investigation. Remember, they said 10 years and $250,000 per offense.
I mean, and you mentioned a good investment. Well, I guess, once he got past just a couple of slides, I guess he just couldn't stop himself.
The recovered items included slides, scopes, and magazines that trace back to the ATF facility where Yates was a contractor. In the course of the investigation, Cox testified a Bedford, PA man told authorities that he had a long-standing business relationship with Yates. The Bedford man told authorities that he bought 15 rifles, at least 80 handguns, and 30 revolvers, and 10 to 15 AR-style lower receivers from Yates, according to court records. Many handguns and revolvers were ATF duty weapons, records said. 4 stolen firearms that the government alleges Yates sold to the Pennsylvania man were fully automatic machine guns. The government also contends that Yates sold bulk amount of ammunition stolen from the ATF to the Pennsylvania buyer. The record said. Yates also allegedly sold a .40 caliber pistol stolen from the ATF facility to a contract maintenance worker who worked there. He stole a gun from the place and then sold it to someone else who worked there. The $300 sale occurred at the defendant's residence, record said. The firearm was an ATF service weapon submitted for destruction, record said. Yates also is accused of selling another firearm to the maintenance worker that had been recovered in a criminal investigation in Pensacola, Florida for approximately $450. In total, the investigation found that Yates stole 31 firearms from the ATF that were traced to prior criminal investigations and that they were sent to the facility to be destroyed. 9 firearms that Yates stole had characteristics that ordinarily require them to be registered under the NFA, but the government alleges that wasn't done. Why would he register a stolen gun? Come on.
Yeah.
In February 28th, a search of Yates' home at 496 East Burke Street in Martinsburg, the government found more than $1,000 in government property stolen from the ATF facility and alleged that it was converted for his personal use. The property included pistol magazines, AR and AK style upper receivers, a Glock subcompact pistol frame and barrel, multiple rifle scopes and sights, 2 black Glock pistol boxes containing ATF serial numbers and ammunition. On March 1st, a search of a family member's Clay Rock Drive residence led to the recovery of additional firearms and ammunition that Yates stole and moved to the residence. That same day, Yates was arrested at the Winchester Avenue. Police recovered 5 firearms from his 2017 Toyota Tacoma, including a machine gun and a pistol he stole from the ATF facility. The stolen machine gun was not registered in the National Firearms Registry and transfer record. In testimony about the search of the Clay Rock Drive residence, authorities recovered $39,620 in the home. When questioned by defense attorney, they acknowledged that the government had not determined whether the cash was from gambling proceeds or another source. From gambling proceeds? Where did that come from? They haven't mentioned gambling yet. Mills told Trumbull that Yates would receive treatment for gambling and PTSD disorders at a Virginia residential treatment facility if he were placed on home confinement while his case is pending. Trumbull revoked Yates' bond this month after he failed to appear for a hearing. Wow.
Guys, I got a bag. I got it.
All right, Tony. Thank you for joining.
Yep.
I think it's about time to end it too. It's about that time.
Alrighty. Yeah, but it's crazy. Did mention it, before we actually shut it down, how long this went on before they actually stopped him?
They started investigating it in February, but he did it from 2016 to 2019 is what they say, but he was a security guard there for 16 years.
So yeah. So it's
but maybe he only had access for the last 3, right? Or like to the important part, or who knows? But
right. He probably didn't start until late 15 or something like that.
They said 2016.
Or 2016.
2016 to 2019, and their investigation began back in February. That's just crazy, though. That just
Yeah, that volume could go through, and it took them, 2.5 years or whatever exactly it was to figure out, hey, I think we're missing something.
Exactly that, right?
I mean, when we're talking thousands.
But yet, like, are we sure that they don't need background checks? That we shouldn't be giving them background checks and training and making them go through all sorts of classes and permits and
Well,
I don't know.
and that'll never be mentioned because it shows, and maybe this can be a topic for another show, is literally the whole HOLE in the idea of background checks actually accomplish something. It just says they haven't done anything, and doesn't mean they're not going to do anything, or they're not of the mindset to do something given the opportunity, such as this security guard. Clearly, when opportunity availed itself, he was willing to dip in. But until that opportunity was there, he would walk on the other line, just waiting.
Well, imagine how many people like he could have potentially sold a gun to, like unknowingly, right? Like even through something like Gunbroker or something, and unknowingly bought, stolen or illegal guns,
Right.
ATF duty weapons are. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine.
Or put guns back in the hands of known felons. I mean, this guy is partially responsible for all the damage he released back out into the world.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I don't think he's probably going to spend the rest of his life. He's already 52. He's going to spend the rest of his life in a federal prison.
So, I mean, we can talk more about that another time because I know we're wrapping the show up. So I'll let you take it home from here.
All right. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Rocky Mountain time, and 6 a.m. Pacific. We'll be back for another early watch. Thank you all for tuning in. Anything to say, Dana?
Nope. We'll see you then.